Hey, this is Peggy with Easy Peasy Machine Embroidery, and this is the second video I am making for the Quilted Patriotic Heart Block so that people can compare the MySewNet Platinum to the Premiere Plus 2 Ultra versions of the software. So, let's take a look at what we're going to be making. This is the actual design that I created in the software and did as a class at the Viking Sewing Gallery. It could be made into a pillow or a table runner or a wall hanging. I actually did a binding on this with a red, white, and blue striped binding, and it looks pretty cool. And lastly, I want to show you how it looks on the screen of the computer. This is how it looks as I was digitizing it. Remember to like and subscribe to my channel. Sorry about that. I made a rookie mistake. Like I keep telling people, I am no professional. So, anyway, remember to like and subscribe to my channel. Leave comments. I try to answer them. Sometimes it takes me a day or two, but I do try to answer questions when you ask them. So, when you first go into MySewNet, you can start with a blank canvas, or you can go directly into the digitizing. I usually just go directly into the blank canvas. And we are going to do a 260 by 260 square hoop. You could also choose your machine, whichever machine you have, and go in that way and choose your hoop. You could also do enter hoop size and do 260 by 260 there. And for those of you that don't know it, you can also type in, say you wanted a 10-inch by 10-inch, you could put 10 and use the quotation mark there, and it will convert it to millimeters. So 10 inches is 254 millimeters. But for this project, we are going to do 260. So, and we are going to go into Create, and we are going to go into the digitizing module. Everything is right here, nice and handy dandy. You don't have to find things down here below. And the nice thing about this program is when you go into digitizing, you create your project, and when it's created, you just X out here and you go right back into the embroidery mode, and you don't have to export it out and then reinsert it and all that happy stuff, because we're going to be starting from scratch. I'm just going to hit cancel here, and we are going to be using Quick Create and Point Create today. In Premiere Plus 2 Ultra, it is Precise Create, so just a little change in terms. And in the Quick Create, we are going to turn off the pattern fill. So right now you can see they are highlighted with that darker color. If I click on the top of the block, it takes that color off, so that means it is unselected. Before I get too far in, I want you to look at the View tab. My grid is set at 6.4 millimeters. So if you want to have the same exact screen that I'm doing, I suggest that you change your screen your grid to 6.4 millimeters. Another thing that I find that is a little different in MySewNet is the background is in, the edit background is in the view tab. So if I wanted to go into edit that background, there is my paint, there's the multiply. Those are things that I used to use a lot, and when I first started using MySewNet, I couldn't find them. But they're right there, nice and easy to find once you get used to things. I'm going back into Quick Create. My grid size is 6.4. The grid size just kind of helps you line things up, so. Oh, back one step here again. If you have a design here and you want to see what size that design is, all you have to do, and we're going to pretend I have a design here, you go up here and you click on Get Length, and then you left click and you have a little ruler. So you left click here, and as you extend this ruler here, it tells the length. So from the start block to the end block, it's 6 inches. So if I wanted something that was exactly 6 inches, right there it is. Right there. Okay? So that's how you can measure things. Anyway, we're going back to Quick Create. So, I know I'm going to have a heart. It needs to be satin outlined. So I've selected satin outline. I'm going to go down to, in the shape section, I'm going to go down to heart number 72. I'm not going to do anything at this point. I'm going to go up to fill area and line, way over here on the right. Notice how when the fill area and line menu comes up, it says no fill and satin line. I want to change my satin width to a 5, and I'm just going to say OK here. And I'm going to change my first color. The first color when you're digitizing is always blue. I don't know why, but it's always blue. So we're going to double left click, and I am going to change it to, and let me read my directions, 2420. And I'm going to use Rayon 40, Robeson Anton Rayon 40. And here is, if you're using, these are the thread ranges that I normally use, that I have added to my thread cache, and I will get to that a little bit later. But if you want to show all thread ranges because you're using something different, you click the show all thread ranges, and now you have all the thread ranges. So you just pick whatever you use and you're good to go. Okay. So I am going to use 2420. 2420. And if you haven't started using thread cache, oh my gosh, you need to. I have all the threads that I have in my stash recorded in my thread cache, so when I'm doing photo stitch or something that I'm digitizing with a lot of colors, it only lets me use what threads I already own, which is a lifesaver. Alright, so back to this. I'm going to click on shape. It sends a heart onto my screen. I am going to get rid of that thing. It drives me nuts. Alright, so I'm going to put that heart up here. And I am going to hold down the corner here, and I'm going to hold down the Control key while I resize. In Premiere Plus 2 Ultra, the Create module, it's the Shift key. In MySewNet, it is the Control key that resizes proportionally. This little circle is the changing the angle of your design. And I want my design to be right about there. So 1, 2, 3. I want it. Here's my center of my design. Remember 9th grade algebra, or whenever you had algebra and you had to plot the graphs. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I want my heart to end right about here. So I'm just going to bring it down just a little bit more. All right. So I have my first heart all made. Now, I'm going to do a right click. This is the film strip. When I talk about the film strip, this is what I'm talking about. I'm right clicking. You can duplicate or copy it. Duplicate is going to put just a duplicate there. If you copy it, then you're going to have to paste it. If you duplicate it, it's going to put another copy. It's not going to be exactly right over the first one. Whereas if you copy and paste it, it will be exactly right over the first one. These grid lines help you to line up your design. I'm going to move this down so it's right on that line. Perfect. So I have 2 hearts. I'm going to use the little triangle right here on the side. That is the mirror image tool. And now I'm going to go up to the Home tab, and I'm going to use my box select tool. I'm going to left click on it to select it. And I'm going to put my cursor in the top left corner of my screen, and I'm going to hold that left cursor down and make a box around those 2 hearts, and I am going to duplicate it. And I'm going to move those 2 hearts down to the lower half of my screen. And I'm just going to use that mirror image triangle and use that mirror image. So I'm going to scooch those up a little bit. And I'm going to scooch my top 2 hearts down a little bit. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to click on both of those 2 hearts so it boxes in both of them. And I'm going to scooch them down just a little bit. So if I line my box up, perfect. Okay, so I count up 1, 2 boxes, down 1, 2 boxes. Now I do not need these grouped anymore. So I'm going to ungroup them. And I don't need this color red anymore. So I'm just going to delete that. Another thing that I am going to do is I'm going to think about the way that my machine is going to stitch this design out. And it's going to stitch this design first, then it's going to stitch this design, and then it's going to stitch this design, which means there's going to be a pretty big jump stitch. And I would rather it just stitch things out clockwise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on number 5 in my film strip, and I'm going to left click and just drag that up. You can see that there's a gray bar that just landed between 3 and 4 as I move my mouse. So I'm left clicking and moving my mouse up, and I let go, and now this block just is in the position where it'll stitch out in the 3rd place, and this will stitch out 4th. Okay, next on my list, when you add a color change, if I am not paying attention to what I'm doing, say I was just working with this block, but now I want to add that Patriotic heart block, and I want to, so I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna do a color change command, and I'm gonna say change color, and I know that I would like to use the sulky cotton variegated 30, and I believe it is 4105. It is the Patriotic America Cotton 30 weight. There it is. Oops, guess what? I wasn't in the wrong place when I added that new color. So, very easy. I'm going to hit the undo, and notice how it has Control plus Z in parentheses. You can also use that as a keyboard shortcut, and it will take that out of there. You need to be on the very last section of your film strip when you add a new element. It will always add it below whatever you are highlighted. So, on number 5, I'm going to click Insert Color Change. And 4105. Now I talked about thread cache. This color is in my thread cache. I add everything in my thread cache that I own. But if you wanted to do that yourself, it is in the configure menu. So, to find the configure menu, you would go back to File. Here's another thing that's, really easy to find. Configure and Utilities. Thread cache. It used to be down here on the bottom in the Premiere Plus software. Those 3 little threads used to be down in this area. Okay, so there's your thread cache. So you add the thread ranges that you use, Isocord, Florani, whatever, Madeira. You add whatever threads that you have. So I've added all my threads. So you would just click on the manufacturer, Isocord. So say you use the Poly 40, so you make sure that's highlighted, and then you just click the arrow, and it ends up over here. Okay? So now you have your thread databases. So show my thread ranges. These are your threads. So now you go and get your threads out, and you go and get your pile of Robeson Anton Rayon 40 that we carry in Viking Sewing Gallery. And you say, I know I have 2296 black. And I'm going to show you something else here too before I get too far. I have something called PZ Database. In your thread cache, you're going to automatically see something called My Threads. This is something that they put in there on their own. You may or may not have these threads, and it's kind of immaterial. and I haven't quite figured out how to delete that baby. So I just go here and add new database, and then I named it PZ database, and that's the one that contains all of the threads that I currently have in my stash. Okay, so those are my threads. I have an applique database, and instead of a color, I have where it tells my machine what I'm doing. So if it's a placement line, or if it's a stitch the fabric down or stitch the batting line down, it shows up on my machine exactly what I'm doing. Okay. So once I've found the number of the thread I want and the name and everything is correct, all I do is add that, arrow over, add it to my database. We're good to go. And everything you own is going to show up there, and you can actually print this out on a piece of paper, take it to the store with you, see what you've got, what you don't have when you go shopping for thread, so you can pick up new thread colors or whatever you want to do. Okay? So that's thread cache. If you do photo stitch, I highly recommend that you add the threads that you have. Anyway, alright, moving on. So I've added the Patriotic thread. Excuse me. I know I'm going to need a satin line. My fill area and line, I know I'm going to leave the satin stitch the same as it was. So all I'm going to do is click Shape and Line. There's my heart. I am going to hold down the control and make this so it is going to overlap. And I'm going to move that up just a little bit. And I'm going to center it on that center line. And I'm going to duplicate it. And duplicate it. And duplicate it. So I have 4 of them. Just going to place those down there. Now I can use my mirrors and my rotation to place them where I want and scooch them down a little bit. Okay, there we go. And scooch it down. And there's this one. Okay. And we're going to scooch that down just a little bit. Alright, so let's see what we got here. This one needs to go up to the top, so I'm going to move that to the top. And this one I want to stitch out second, so I'm going to move that up. Remember, I am just left clicking and dragging, and this one would be next and this one would be last, so that looks good. And I'm going to add another element to my design. So I want to be on my last block, which is number 10, on my film strip, and right click over block 10, and we're going to do insert color change, And now I am going to go up to Robeson Anton Rayon 40, and I'm going to pick a blue. Okay, I'm going to pick 2527 for this one. Any blue will do, whatever floats your boat. And we're going to do something different this time. We're going to use a satin line, but we're going to use applique. So we want to turn that on, and we're going to go back over to fill area and line. We're going to change that applique down to a 3. We are going to go into the center tab. We have standard applique checked. We're going to go into select fabric, and we can change the color here. In my design, it's red with a blue outline. So I'm going to leave it red, but you could choose any color that you wanted here. You could also do a fabric, and what's really cool is you can add fabrics. So you could add a new background fabric. So if you were doing an applique and you wanted to see what it actually looked like, you could scan in your fabric and import it into your fabric swatches so that you could see what it actually looks like in your design. It would actually show up on your screen. So that is pretty cool. But that is in both programs. So I am going to go back into the quick, and you can actually see what it would look like as fleece or sheer or silk or terry cloth or woven. So we're going to choose woven, and we're just going to say OK here. And OK here. And we're going to use number 72 again. And there's our heart shape. Now another thing I wanted to mention here is if you lose that box around your design for some reason and you can't get it back, it keeps coming back for me, okay, but for whatever reason, if you can't get it back and you click on this and it doesn't come back, you can always just go up here and click box select and it will come back. Anyway, so I'm going to hold down my control, and I'm going to resize this heart, and I'm going to place it right up here. And now I'm going to be quick about this. I'm just going to do the keyboard shortcut of Control C, copy, Control V, Control V, Control V, until I have 4 of them, and I'm just going to move those. 1, 2, oops, I grabbed the center of rotation. One of my students is probably laughing right now. You heard me, Deb. Alright, so I'm going to do this, rotate it, I'm going to line that up till it pleases me, and if I need to make that a little smaller or something, I will. I might want to change that just a little bit. And this one is okay. And this one needs rotation. Okay. Alright. So, let's see, these two side ones, we could scooch these in just a little bit. Or we could totally, let's see, keep that one, 1, 2, 3, delete those. We know we have to have one a little bit smaller for that section. So, for whatever reason, we're just going to redo a couple of those. Whoops, didn't want to do that. Undo. Copy. Paste. So now I have 4 of them again. So, move those around again. And now they should fit. Yeah, man. Scooch, scooch, scooch. There we go. And yeah, see, this one does not want to cooperate. So let's see. You are this one. And scooch, scooch. Okay. So now I'm okay with that design. The only thing I would want to do is reposition the order. And that one. And that one. Okay, we're good. Alright. So now I'm ready to start saving. So, what we're going to do, always, always, always do a save as. And I am going to go to my desktop and I'm going to make a brand new folder and I'm going to call it YouTube MySewNet Quilted Heart Block. Okay, and I'm going to double click in that. So, I'm going to call it MySewNet QHB. Okay, that's an EDO file. That means I can go in and change it anytime I want. If I decide that I want these little hearts bigger or smaller, I can change them. If I want to change the order of how it stitches out, I can change it. If I don't save that file and I have to go in and insert it as an embroidery or whatever, it's a little more difficult to play with at that point. So always save it as an EDO file. Believe me, you will thank me. Next on the list, we have Applique on there. Some people like to say, oh yeah, I'm just going to do that little placement line and I'm going to take my little block of fabric and I'm going to put it on that placement line so it covers the placement line and I'm going to stitch it down and I'm going to cut around it with my applique shears and everything's happy hunky-dory. Okay, I always do an export applique pieces. If you have a Cricut, you can click on this and then choose your format. But I always, I click on the print template. I go into print setup. I do not print them out on my printer. There should be a choice Microsoft Print to PDF or some kind of way to print to a PDF on your computer. And I print it to PDF. So now I say print. It should say that it's okay with printing it to the PDF. I say okay. And now I say template. TEMPLATE for hard block. I'm in my quilted heart block. And I'm also going to put MSN in front of it. So what that's going to do is it's going to make a template that looks like this. And because it's a PDF, it's saved. You will always have it. If you want to, remake that design, I tend to cut, it takes a scrap of fabric just this big. And I tend to cut my heart just a little bit bigger. Use a little fabric spray, or I actually have these little adhesive dots that I put on the back of them. It holds my little heart in place perfectly fine, and it works out good. But that is my template that helps me with my appliques. You can do it, you don't have to do it, whatever. It's fine. And lastly, we are going to export. Do you need to do this? Not always. You don't necessarily. I'll show you why in a minute, but just in case, I like a backup, because I don't want to do all this work and maybe have it fail, because sometimes I'm bebopping around all over in my software, and I've had it fail because I'm bebopping around in my software, and I need to learn to use, just play with one thing at a time. So, I'm in my YouTube MSN Q Heart block, and there it is. I'm exporting it. Export, we're good. Alright, so what normally happens is, say you didn't export that, you just close this out right here, and it ends up right back in your, and this is wonderful, I love this part. I don't have to go back out, reopen my folder, insert it back into the embroidery program. I don't have to do all that. I love it. So, and now, and you're saying, but what about that quilted background you had on your design? Yeah. So now we're going to go back into that digitizing. And we're going to hit cancel again. We're going to go in Quick Create. I'm going to change my line to a running stitch. You could use running stitch or double stitch. It's going to make a stitched line around the outside of your quilt block. I'm going to change pattern fill to motif fill. And you could, I guess, use any of these, whatever. I'm going to go over here to area, fill area and line, and tell it what I want done with what I'm doing. So motif line. So we're going to use the universal group. Remember, you've got drop down arrows here, and you've got all kinds of things to play with. You've got the Husqvarna Viking stuff, and you've got the FAF stuff. If you go into Husqvarna Viking, you've got all those things to play with. FAF has even more. I'm just going into Universal. Category is going to be General Motifs 1. Got all these designs to play with. I'm just going to do a bubble. For a patriotic thing, you could choose stars. And right now it's set at 8. And I'm going to use 2 motifs here. So make sure this little box is checked. I'm going to say I'm going to go 20 here. And I'm going to do 10 here. So motif 1 is 10, motif 2 is 20. And I'm going to say okay. Nothing happened. Huh. Yep, I got to hit the shape. There you go. Whoops, guess what? I didn't pick square. So now we're going to go over here to the film strip. We're going to right click, hit delete. Go back up here, choose number 3 square. And remember, you could do this with any of those shapes. Gets doing here and it starts getting real fun to use all these shapes. Go over here, click on the shape, drag it out to fit your block. I'm going to show you something here for just a second. I'm doing this on purpose. We're going to go back to home. Actually, we're going to pretend I'm going to export this, and it's going to say, oops, embroidery is too large. You can't export it. If you ever see that situation come up, you go into Modify Block, and you say scale it to fit the hoop. And it scales it to fit your hoop. So now you're looking at this design. Do you like it? If you want to change it, you put your cursor over number 2 on your film strip, you right click it, go down to Properties, and you can change it. So I think number 10, we could change that to maybe 15. And if you left click and drag this screen around, you can mess with this a little bit, and that thing is going to drive me nuts. Okay. Oh, now it's really going to drive me nuts. Okay, we're going to pause. Yay, I just figured out how to get rid of that stupid toolbar. Okay, so, one other thing here. You're looking at the top row of circles and the bottom row of circles, and, you know, one is a full circle and one is kind of half circle, and you can take and, if you figure out which is which, that's 15 and that is 20, so it's the 15, and you can play with these numbers just a little bit. So now you have a full circle at top, full circle at the bottom. The side looks somewhat okay, and then you say okay. Alrighty, so you've got your background. You can even change that color to cream if you want. You can save it if you want as a separate background to use later. You should be able to just cancel this out here, and it shows up in your regular embroidery screen. Love, love, love that. Your regular embroidery screen now has all the different elements will show up as a film strip. This is really awesome. In your Premiere Plus 2, if I had, let's just say I'm gonna add a bunch of stuff here, and we'll just delete it. afterwards. So say I had a bunch of these little fishies swimming around. On my block. And I wanted to, if I were in Premiere Plus, I would have to use my tab to go between all the different pieces of my design if I wanted to change something. So if I wanted to get rid of one of these fish, I'd have to keep tabbing until I got to that fish. Here, I can just highlight them on that film strip and just get rid of them in one fell swoop. I can select just the fish that I want to work with. Say I wanted to turn him into a blue fish instead of an orange fish. I could just select just that one fish, very easily see him on that film strip, and work with just that fish instead of tabbing through 19 things. That I love. There's no longer that arrange button that you have to figure out, you know, should I bring this part of the design forward or backward, and how do I arrange it? Now it's very easy. I just take this first, because right now it's going to stitch out the hearts and then it's going to stitch out the background. All I do is left click and drag that heart section down underneath. That I love. Okay, so that is really cool. That's the biggest difference as far as this block is concerned. Okay, so comparisons, that is just, I'm only going to talk comparisons, as far as creating this block between the two versions of the software. Okay, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this video, and the last thing you're going to do for this is you're going to do a file. You're going to export it. You're going to call it, you're going to put it out there in the desktop on the folder that you created, MSN Heart Block, and we're going to replace it with it completely finished, and we're good to go. The other thing we could have done is combine it. Export it. I should have combined it anyway. So we're good to go. Alright. Thanks. Remember to subscribe, leave a comment, like it, whatever. We're good to go. Catch you later. Bye.